Lesson 4 is about having a power of 0. We've actually already seen this in some other videos, so this is going to be a very short lesson. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways of how we can prove that anything with a 0 power should equal 1. So the first way is the pattern way, and this is the way that you've seen in a video. So let's say we had 5 to the 4th, 5 to the 3rd, 5 to the 2nd, 5 to the 1st, 5 to the 0. Okay, and we're going to see what 5 to 0 has to be based upon the rule here. So 5 to the 4th means you have 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, which I don't know off the top of my head, so I'll use my calculator, which is 625. Okay, moving on. 5 to the 3rd means we have 5 3 times, which is 125. 5 squared is 5 twice, which means we have 25. And 5 to the 1st means we have just 1 5, which is 5. So here we can see each time we're dividing by 5 because we're losing a 5. So if we divide 5 by 5, what do we get? We get 1. So 5 to the 0 equals 1. So this is one way we can prove that anything to the 0 power equals 1. Okay, so this is the pattern method. Now I'll show you another way using the product rule. So let's take a look at a couple sample problems. So let's say I had 5 to the 5th times 5 to the 0. Let's say I had 4 to the 0 times 4 squared times 4 to the 3rd. And let's say I had a -1 squared times -1 to the 0. Okay. If we just apply the product rule, which means we add the exponents, let's see what these answers are. So our base is always the same. If we add 5 and 0, that's just 5. For the second one, the base is still 4 because it always stays the same. We add our 0 plus 2 plus 3, which is 5. And on this bottom one, our base stays -1, and 2 plus 0 is 2. Okay? So here's where we prove what anything to the 0 has to equal 1. If we take a look here, you can see that we have 5 to the 5th times this equals 5 to the 5th. And we all know that the only number you can multiply by something and it doesn't change is 1. Just like if I took 3 times 1, it's still 3. So here we have 5 to the 5th staying 5 to the 5th because 5 to the 0 really does equal 1. Let's look at this next one. Same thing here. It's almost like we can completely disregard this because 4 squared times 4 to the 3rd equals this. And what number could we multiply this that would stay the same? 1. So 4 to the 0 has to equal 1. Same thing down here. We see -1 to the 2nd power staying the same. And what can you multiply by that to stay the same? You multiply by 1, and it doesn't change at all. Okay? So that's the other way that you can prove that anything to a 0 power equals 1. It's the fact that it doesn't change the identity of something when you multiply by it. So our 0 power rule is that, again, anything to a 0 power equals 1. Unless, of course, it's 0 to the 0 power, which you remember from the last video is undefined. But you don't have to know that for this class. You just need to know anything to a 0 power equals 1. Okay? Even if it's exponents, fractions, negatives, anything like that, it's going to equal 1. So let's take a look at some examples of this. So let's say we had 5 times x to the third, and all of that to the 0 power. Okay? We just learned the distributive property, and we know that we could distribute out the 0 to each of them, meaning it's 5 to a 0 times 3 times 0 is 0. And again, both of these are 1. Or you could just look at it and be like, well, anything to a 0 power equals 1. Even if there's multiple things inside, all this still equals 1. Okay, let's look at another example. Let's say we had 3 times y to the 0 power, and then that entire thing is to the 5th. Now this one's different than this one. We can't just say this entire thing is 1 because everything's raised to a 5th power. So we're going to have to distribute that 5. So let's distribute that 5 to the 3. So that's 3 to the 5th. Distribute the 5 to the y. So we have to do our power rule of 0 times 5. Oops. 0 times 5, which we know is going to end up being y to a 0. And y to the 0 is just 1. So if you wanted to, you could write it like this. But we all know multiplying something by 1 is not going to change it. So we really could just write the answer as 3 to the 5th. And some of you saw that back here. You're like, oh, well, this is going to just be 1. And so all we really need to carry through is the 3 to the 5th. Okay? And that's it for 0 power.